Let me see if I can turn my microphone on. That helps a little bit occasionally. Good morning. My name is Judge Davis, and I'm going to call to order the August 19th, 2021 meeting of the San Bernardino County Advisory Redistricting Commission. This morning, we're privileged to have, and we would very much like to welcome, Chaplain Charles Maddox from the city of Barstow, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation. Chaplain Maddox has been the lead pastor at Crossroads Assembly of God in Barstow for over 20 years, and he has also served on the Foundation Board of Directors at the Barstow Community College since 2014. Chaplain, we greatly appreciate you joining us here this morning. If you'd be kind enough to lead us, please.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the privilege. Let's all stand together. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if you'd care to remain standing, I'd like to lead you in this prayer. And if you're comfortable in doing so, just bow with me and join with me. We bow together for a brief moment before the committee addresses a pressing agenda. To give thanks to you, O God, for your divine presence that has protected us, watched over us, and intervened on our behalf in ways that sometimes we may not even realize. We have become more aware amid the COVID pandemic just how precious life, family, and our health really is. So we pray for those who may be ill. We pray for the first responders, the healthcare professionals who tend to their needs. And we pray for those who have had to say goodbye to this side of heaven to loved ones who have died. We also pray for our San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputies who were wounded just this week. We pray for their speedy recovery. We pray for their families. We pray for all of our law enforcement family. Protect them, watch over them, care for them. We pray for guidance, wisdom, and unity among those who make decisions that affect the lives of the citizens in our communities, of our county. We pray for truth and honesty to come to the forefront in communication of details and information. With all that is happening globally, with so much chaos, confusion, unrest, even evil, if ever there was a time in our world, our nation, state, city, and county for you, O God, to show up mightily, I believe that time is now. Leadership, the decision makers need your wisdom. They need your help in making the best decisions possible for all of us. So for these committee members, I pray this blessing. I pray that the God of heaven will fill your hearts with joy, with peace, with courage and wisdom, and above all, with love. I pray that you keep them and their families well, and that you keep them safe. And I pray, O God, sincerely, as I give thanks to you for each one of them, that you will do well in blessing their lives. And may all of us be reminded that we never know what a day will bring, so we must live each day helping to make a positive difference in the lives and for the good of others. And in doing so, we can truly be blessed. And this I pray in the name of the one who extends grace and mercy to us all. Amen. Thank you again for the privilege.
Chaplain, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we will take the roll call for the commission. And for that, I would turn to Madam Secretary. Ms. Monell, please.
Good morning, Judge. Thank you. Judge Davis?
Present.
Vice Chair Nakeem?
Present.
Judge King? Commissioner Creffield?
Present.
Commissioner Little?
Present.
Commissioner Basley? Alternate Commissioner Hazlett?
Present.
Commissioner Jernigan?
Present.
Commissioner Anderson? Commissioner Shannon? Commissioner Reynolds? And Commissioner Wilson? Thank you, Judge. We do have a quorum with Commissioner Basley, alternate Commissioner Shannon, and Wilson absent. Thank you.
Ms. Monell, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our morning roll call. The first item we have on the agenda this morning is the approval of the commission meeting minutes from August 12th, 2021 commission meeting. I will indicate at the outset that I will be abstaining from any vote as to whether or not to approve the minutes, inasmuch as I was absent. And we had the good fortune to have Ms. Jessica Nakeen, the commissioner seated to my right and your left, chair the meeting in my absence. So all that being said, I'm prepared to take any public comment on this agenda item if we have any public comment.
I've received no public comments, Judge. Thank you.
Madam Secretary, thank you so much. I appreciate that. At this time, I will be happy to entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Is there such a motion from the commission members?
Move to approve.
We have a motion. Do I have a second for the motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, and with my abstention, I'll indicate that the motion, in fact, does carry, and the August 12th meeting minutes are, in fact, approved. At this time, we have the good fortune to have Ms. Julie Serber provide a report to the commission. And Ms. Serber, if you would be kind enough, please, to do so.
Thank you, Judge Davis and Commissioners. Julie Serber, I'm a Principal Assistant County Counsel. I wanted to start my report by providing some additional information to you about an email you received last week that contained information from the current 2020 census. The information regarding the census from the census of 2020 was correct. What was incorrect on what you were provided last week was that it was laid over the 2001 supervisorial district boundaries instead of the current supervisorial district boundaries that were created in 2011. The information that you received this morning in the handout that you were provided provides that information using the correct current 2011 supervisorial district boundaries, just for your clarification. I also wanted to provide a report regarding two items that will affect the timing of the work of the Advisory Redistricting Commission. The first is that under the Advisory Redistricting Commission ordinance, the Commission shall recommend to the Board of Supervisors a minimum of 2 possible maps containing the boundaries of all 5 of the supervisorial districts. At the Commission's meeting last week, the Commission approved a revised calendar of meetings that shows the first meeting by the Board of Supervisors to discuss approval of possible redistricting maps is on November 9th. And to back up for a moment, the Redistricting Commission, you will provide recommended maps to the Board of Supervisors, but then the Board of Supervisors will be making the final approval of the supervisorial district maps. So because of the way the calendar has been set up, the Commission, by its November 2nd meeting, needs to vote on the 2 or more possible maps that the Commission will be recommending to the Board of Supervisors. Then the second timing issue, as we discussed briefly last week, is that under state law, the county, and by extension the Commission, cannot release draft maps until after the block level redistricting database is made available to the public. This database is not the database that was released last week, but it is the database that is adjusted to remove prisoners from the population base of any location that they're incarcerated at and reallocate the prisoners back to their last known pre-incarceration place of residence if possible. This reallocation process, we're told by the state, will take several weeks, but to my knowledge, we don't have an exact date that they are saying they're going to release that database. If the database is released on or before September 16th, under the election code, the commission needs to wait 3 weeks to release draft maps to the public. But if the database is released after September 16th, then the commission only needs to wait 1 week to release draft maps to the public. So I wanted to provide the commission with some understanding about the timing of your process as required by state law. That's the end of my report. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Any of them may have any questions or comments at all for Ms. Serber. Mr. Jernigan, any questions?
No.
Ms. Hazelett, any questions?
No, sir.
Mr. Creffield, any questions?
No.
Ms. Nakeen, any questions?
No.
Mr. Little, any questions?
No.
Judge King, any questions? Wonderful. Let me ask, Madam Secretary, do we have any requests by members of the public to speak on this issue or to perhaps inquire?
No, Judge, we do not have any comments.
Very well. I want to thank Ms. Serber, obviously, for her continued efforts and her continued updating for the commission, and also for the explanation as to the little difficulty we had with original data which had been presented but was overlaid on what turned out to be the wrong map. And I'm glad we got that easily taken care of. At this time, I think we're going to have a presentation on the status of the 2020 census data from Redistricting Insights. And it's my understanding Mr. Fabian Valdez is the presenter. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Very well. If we could, at this time, have the presentation by Mr. Valdez.
Good morning. Can you all hear me and see me?
We can see you now. We could hear you before, but now we have the pleasure of seeing you as well as hearing you, Mr. Valdez. Welcome.
What wonderful. Well, thank you for having me again. Just a matter of technical question here. I wanted to be able to share my screen, but I'm not seeing the share option on the Zoom. Is that something that can be enabled for me?
Mr. Valdez, I wish I was either in a position to answer that question or smart enough to answer that question. Sadly, neither of those exist at the moment with me. Give us one moment. We're going to see if we can find someone that can answer that question and perhaps provide a share screen option to you.
And if not, it's okay because I believe you have the handouts in front of you, so I can talk through them as well and go over some of those data with you.
Very good.
But while they're looking into that, just feel free to interrupt me once they have an answer. I can talk a little bit about the census data release and what we've seen so far. So first, the census data, as you recall, last Thursday when I was in Apple Valley with you all, the census data was being released that day. It did indeed come out. We have since ingested that data and started analyzing it for mostly consistency and any issues that we might have had with the integrity of the data. We did not find any at this time. We're still continuing to look to make sure everything seems correct and copacetic. Providing we don't find any, the data we have will be what we will be using for analysis starting now. As was mentioned earlier, there is a second set of data which will be released by the statewide database, coming from the state of California. They are taking the data released by the census and then reallocating prisoners within those counties and cities back to their original locations. So that will affect the county of San Bernardino in two ways. First, there are a number of prisons in the county of San Bernardino, which will have those populations zeroed out. So for instance, Chino prison, they will have those populations zeroed out. And then on top of that, any people who were currently incarcerated in California, not federal, but in the state and county incarcerations, people who are incarcerated will be reallocated back to their place where they originally, their address. So anybody who's currently incarcerated from the county of San Bernardino, wherever they may have lived when they were incarcerated, they will be put back. So that could be in any city in San Bernardino, and I believe it also might include some of the unincorporated non-city locations in the county. So once we have those data from the statewide database, we will be loading those into the online Latitude online redistricting tool, which is the online link that we provided to the public for using for drawing maps. And they will then be able to use the correct, most up-to-date data that we will also be using on the commission side for drawing our maps. With that being said, as mentioned, we do not have a clear-cut number or date for when those data will be provided to us. They said it usually will take about 4 weeks. We've been given estimates for mid-September. We are hoping they stick with that estimate, but we also hope they'd come early, but we just don't have a clear understanding at this time when those data will be released to us. Any questions on that little bit I just went over?
Any of the commissioners have any questions at all for Mr. Valdez on that topic? No? No? Mr. Valdez, I think you are going to be spared any questioning from my colleagues and myself on that point. Please continue.
This time, certainly. So now I want to jump in a little bit to the current districts and the cities and what the census is saying about our areas. Before I get to that, briefly, I just want to mention, as we've been looking at the data and comparing it to what the 2019 American Community Survey had to say about the county, we've noticed a few small discrepancies in terms of the ACS, which is the American Community Survey, having things a little bit wrong. We expected that. The data we're seeing in San Bernardino looks right. And there has also been question about whether or not there would be a Hispanic or Latino undercount in the census. That is something we are most keenly observing in San Bernardino, considering the overall population of the county. We did not see anything that would indicate there was a Latino or Hispanic undercount. We are looking further at every possible incarnation of the data we can, but we have not so far seen anything that would make us think that there's a problem with the numbers we're seeing for those populations. Looking first at it looks like I'm not being able to share my screen, but that's okay. You should have the handouts, I believe, provided to you from Pamela, I believe, sent them this morning, and you should have them there for you as well. I'm first going to look at the San Bernardino County Board of Supervisor breakouts. So that should be the one with the maps you should see. And I'm just going to briefly go through it. Now that we have the 2011 lines loaded up with the correct data, I want to just talk first about that first, not the first page with the map, the first page with the numbers. It breaks out the 2020 census numbers as well as the citizen voting age population. To be clear, the difference between those two numbers is the census is counting every heartbeat, every single person who is in a location. That is what the census endeavors to do. CVAP, or citizen voting age population, is only counting those people 18 years or older who are a citizen. So those could be very different numbers, considering you might have in an area a lot of children who do not count in CVAP. You might have people who are not nationalized and aren't voting, they do not count towards CVAP, or you may have people who are undocumented and they do not count towards CVAP. As you can see, this is broken down by district 1 through 5. You can see the populations of each on the top line. And currently, the deviation that you see right underneath that second line deviation is the deviation from the current ideal population we would want based on the population of San Bernardino County divided by 5, right? So you can notice the first supervisorial district as it is currently drawn is about 11,446 people over what an ideal population would be for current population in San Bernardino County. And you can see it also breaks down in 2, 3, 4, and 5. At the moment, it looks like 1 and 2 have the largest deviations, about 2.6% and 2.2% respectively. And the other supervisor districts look to be very close to what they would want for an ideal population. The reason I bring that up is because, as we've spoken before, the percentage deviation that will be allowed when drawing maps is a maximum of 10% total deviation. Typically, it's seen as 5% plus or 5% minus. However, we always endeavor to get closest to 0 to make sure that the populations are for each district are as close as possible. Underneath population, you have Latino, Asian, Black, and other. One thing I want to mention is other does include a lot of things. We do not have on here populations for what would be considered white. The reason is there's the way the census counts populations for ethnicity and race is you have two types of questions that come on the census. The first question is, are you Hispanic or Latino? And the second question is, which category, Asian, Black, white, other, do you put yourself in? Because of that, if you were to add up the populations of all these things, they would add up to more than 100%. So we try not to confuse people with those data by not including it in that way. And that way you can see Latino, Asian, and Black are included, but other would include everybody else, including the white population, or what would be considered the white population. So as we can see in the districts, the Latino population in 1 is 49.2%, currently as it is currently drawn. And it goes all the way up to District 5, where it is currently 74.5% Latino. That is every heartbeat, by the way. That's not citizen voting age population. When you look at the table below, though, we can see the citizen voting age population. And again, if you look at that Latino CVAP percentage, it's a gray line midway through that table. You'll see in District 5, we go from 74.5% Latino population to 63.2% citizen voting age population. The reason that's important is because when we're drawing districts for Voting Rights Act considerations, our goal is to get that citizen voting age population to 50% plus 1. We're looking for a 50%, just over 50% margin there. So in a lot of places, for instance, District 1, where you have a 49.2% Latino population, you're thinking, well, that's very close to the 50% we need. But if you look at the citizen voting age population of that same district, it's only 37.6% Latino. That means it would not qualify for what you would call a VRA district. It wouldn't be drawn in that way. That is something to consider as we're going to be drawing districts. There is a likelihood we will see a minimum of 2 VRA Latino districts with a probability for a third being moderately high. We could very well see a third Latino VRA district being drawn in the county of San Bernardino. I also want to draw attention to the Asian population. There is a rather sizable Asian population in the city of Chino Hills, moving into Chino, I believe, as well. And it also goes into the LA County and Orange County sections, which kind of border Chino Hills. The Asian population, the reason I bring it up is because even though it is a sizable population, it is not large enough to constitute a Voting Rights Act district. There's just not a high enough population of Asian people living in those districts, or citizen voting age population, Asian people living in that area. So we're probably not going to be seeing a district drawn that will be a Voting Rights Act Asian district. Going to the next page, this is just a breakdown of District 1, similar to the table. The table was just the numbers, but this gives you a little more visual understanding of what it looks like. And you can see where the 2020 census, the numbers change up. You can also see a map of the district. But this is basically the same information you saw on the table, just in a more visual form to make it a little easier to understand. Also, you can see on the maps, some of them should be zoomed in enough where you can see what cities are included in the districts. Any questions on this before I jump over to cities?
Any questions from any of my colleagues? No, you have no questions as of yet, Mr. Valdez.
Looks like I'm explaining everything so well, nobody ever has any questions. I'm good. I'm glad, because that means I'm doing a good job on that. Moving forward, I want to now talk about the second handout, which is the one that has all the cities broken down. Not the maps, but it's just tables of cities. We bring that up. I'm going to just kind of look at this with you and explain what you're looking at here. This is a breakout of all of the cities in San Bernardino County, and it includes two sets of numbers. It includes the 2010 census in those areas, as well as the 2020 census numbers in those areas. Now, for citizen voting age population, you'll notice we're using 2019 That is because there technically hasn't been a 2020 CVAP release. So we do not have numbers, and the 2019 numbers are going to be what we're using for drawing our VRA districts. So I wanted to show you this because this is an explanation of how things have changed in these cities since 2010. You can see on the left-hand side, the population numbers, 2010 to 2020. And you'll notice if you just pick a city at random, for instance, Barstow, which is the fourth one down there, which is, I believe, where you're at today. In 2010, that city was 22,639. And today it is 24,415. You can see also where the Black, Asian, and Hispanic numbers have increased as well. On the right-hand side, you will see what the 2010 CVAP and 2019 CVAP say for that same city. These are using the current city boundary lines. So this is the estimate. So if the city boundaries had changed in any of these places since 2010, we're using the current boundary lines to give you estimates on the 2010 and 2020 counts. There you will also notice there are a number of places that have a name, for instance, Baker, where it says CDP. These locations are not cities as such, but they are census designated places. They're areas that the census has recognized as being a kind of contiguous area and to be counted as such. And so we also list them on here for ease of understanding. A couple of notable places that I wanted to draw your attention in this. First, the city of Chino, which is on that first page. You'll notice it went from 78,000 to 91,000. That is a rather large jump. So it had quite a large population increase in that area. On the second page, forgive me, I said on the second page. I meant on the third page, where you can see the city of Ontario. It went from 164,000 to 175, just over 175,000. Again, that's a rather large jump. Ontario is right next to Chino. So what this shows me is areas like Chino and Ontario, and to an extent, Chino Hills, which didn't have quite as large a population increase, but Chino and Ontario, which border each other, had a rather large population increase, which shows me that there's probably been a lot of development going on in those areas, and that those areas are now going to be counted in a way that they may have to be potentially be split from other areas in a way that they weren't before. The goal when we're districting is to try to keep as many communities whole as possible. That includes cities and census designated places. However, when you have areas like Ontario, which are 175,000 by themselves, and you add that to places like Chino, Chino Hills, and the other bordering cities, you start to get to a point where you have to make decisions on which cities you're going to split or what areas you're going to split. Larger areas like Ontario, Rancho Cucamonga, the city of San Bernardino are your most obvious candidates for those splits, just because they have such large populations, it's easiest to put them into multiple districts. Another, in that third page as well, another large increase was actually, like I said, the city of San Bernardino. You can see it went up approximately 11,000 people as well. And then lastly, on the last page, I want to show you the city of Victorville. Victorville had the largest population increase at almost 20,000 people, 19,000 roughly, people increase in the city of Victorville. That city has grown tremendously in the last 10 years. That is another one that we will have to look at in terms of where it might have been included before and where it will be included going forward. Any questions on these city breakdowns?
Yes, and I have been, unfortunately, and I apologize, I have been neglecting to ask the alternates if they have any question, and I certainly wish to do so now.
Oh, please, yes.
Let me
If
ask-
the alternates have any questions on anything.
If we can, I think Mr. Anderson, one of our alternate members, has a question. Please.
On the mapping, of course, we got the explanation of other, but when you get to this other section here, there's no other.
And for Mr. Valdez's benefit, which section are you speaking about, Mr. Anderson?
I can't hear what he's saying, so
I'm
somebody.
sorry, on your first one on the maps themselves, you had the column for other and your explanation of them. On your breakdown by city, there is no other in those figures.
Right.
Are we supposed to just subtract the other three from the
Were
total?
you able to hear his question, Mr. Valdez?
Yes, I was. And that's a great question, Mr. Anderson, was it correct?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson? That's a great question. The reason we included it on the first one is just so you had an idea of what the total numbers are. The reason we did not include it on the city breakdown is because typically when drawing Voting Rights Act districts, the real things you pay attention to are the ethnicities. So it'd be Black, Asian, and Hispanic. You do not use white as a Voting Rights Act ethnicity. So we did not feel it was necessary to clutter up the page, which this pages already have quite a lot of information. I didn't want to put 4 more columns of something that really doesn't have any bearing on Voting Rights Act in this particular handout. But yes, if you'd like those information, I can definitely provide them for you and give them to you. It's just they will not have any bearing on any kind of map drawing as it will come up.
That's good. I just wanted to be clear so when I see the word total, that was the total population for that. city.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
So that's a great point. In those Black, Asian, Hispanic numbers will not add up to the total because the total will be with other. Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson, thank you very much for that question. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask if our other alternate who's present, Mr. Reynolds, has any questions at all. Wonderful, sir. Thank you. Do any of my colleagues up here with me have any questions? Ms. Hazlett?
Mr. Valdez, so are we to ascertain that when we look at the 2020 census count and then we look at the 2019 CVAP estimate, that when we have cities that have from 2010 to the 2019 CVAP, are we to ascertain that there's been a significant decrease in the voting population because there's children? Or what is your analysis of that? Because
It could be a number of things, and that's actually a good question. Something I want to draw your attention to on that particular information, those particular information. The data you see in the 2019 CVAP is an estimate, okay? And so it's coming from American Community Survey, which it surveys a bunch of people in the state and then comes up with these numbers that their best guesses by census tract, and we aggregate that census tract data up to city and census designated place to try to get an idea. They are estimates, but they are what we have to use for the Voting Rights Act. So beyond that, so that's the first part. So a lot of times what we're going to see is those estimates won't always be exactly what we think of when we're looking at the numbers. I want to draw your attention to the Muscogee CDP, which I believe is on the 3rd page, 2nd line. You'll notice that in Muscogee, the Asian CVAP is 105, but in the 2020 census, they only have 76 Asian people counted. Right? So the reason I bring that up is because these estimates, like I said, are not based on heartbeats. They are guesses. So when we're looking at, so the question being, 2019 CVAP, those numbers. So the total number, for instance, in Adelanto, that first page, Adelanto, you have a total CVAP of 18,090. And in 2010, it was 14,150. So that means the voting age population has increased by roughly 4,000.
and we have that backwards.
You mean the 2019 CVAP, Mr. Valdez, was 14,150?
Do you have a different version of the document than what I'm looking at here?
Right, for Adelanto, 2010, we have 18,090 in the CVAP. In 2019, we have 14,150.
You're right. It looks like those are switched, and that is a mistake that can be corrected.
That would
those are
then
just,
explain why I saw
yeah,
that.
they're just a switch. Yes, so that is correct. So 2019 CVAP would be that 18,090, and 2010 will be 14,001. So that is a great question and something that got missed, and we will correct that and send it out to you with that correction.
So the
but
headers
yes,
on those columns
so-
just need to be reversed?
Yes.
I take it that's true, excuse me, Commissioner, for the whole column, not just Adelanto, but because what this
Yes.
shows is this tremendous decline in population over 9 years that doesn't, for most towns, that doesn't seem
Yeah,
realistic.
it's exactly. They're just basically switched over.
Okay.
So total Black, Asian, and Hispanic, where it's labeled 2010 CVIP, is actually 2019, and then the same thing, total Black, Asian, and Hispanic on 2019 is actually 2010.
Okay.
And I will have a correct version sent to Pamela shortly.
Well, that answers my question, because I was curious why we have an increase in population and decrease in voting population. So I just thought people were
Yes.
being very apathetic.
Well, voting age doesn't necessarily mean they are voting. It just means they're eligible to vote. It just means they're 18 and over and a citizen of the United States.
Any further questions for Mr. Valdez on this topic?
If I may, Judge.
Of course, Commissioner Little.
So, and I appreciate your pointing out that correction, and I appreciate Commissioner Hazlitt pointing it out, because it did seem like a mystery. I take it the 2019 CVAP numbers are the numbers we're going to be using for all purposes. There's not going to be a 2020 number.
Well, so that's a great question. The reality is we do not believe there will be. So the census has indicated that they were not going to be sending a 2020 CVAP, or they were not going to be basically running the 2020 American Community Survey numbers, which is what we would have to use. We would use the 5-year numbers for CVAP in order to do these work. The census has indicated they're not going to be releasing that. And if they do release it, it wouldn't be until late December. So even if it does become available, it won't be available before we have to start having draft maps. And remember, after the census releases those data, they then have to go to statewide database for reformatting before they can even come to us for use in actually drawing. So the reality is we will be using 2019 CVAP estimates.
And the significance, not to make you repeat yourself, but the significance of CVAP is to be in compliance with the Voting Rights Act.
That is correct.
In other words, if I could put, just to give you an example, when I first saw these numbers this morning, it looked like, goodness, our work's done. We're in complete compliance, at least with equality of districts, at least within the threshold. The largest deviation is 2.6%. So, we can be done with this and go home, but that's not really correct, right?
No, and I asked Matt Resrod if he wanted to chime in on this, but the reality is no, because we have to see where those populations have moved to, because we may have to redraw those districts
Right, but we also have
in order
to,
for Voting Rights Act.
right, we have to seek, there's other criteria that aren't implicit in the 2010 maps. We can't just adopt the same maps, or I guess we could, but we probably won't, because the criteria in addition to equality is the Voting Rights Act, geographic contiguity, which I guess we've got, integrity to preserve communities of interest and so forth, and those may have changed over the last 10 years.
Correct.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Valdez.
Absolutely. And Matt, did you want to chime in on that as well?
No, I go back to our first conversation that we had together. The first analysis is population equality, which the Commissioner points out that we're actually in a pretty good spot there, but then we have to go through the Voting Rights Act analysis to make sure we're complying with federal law. That's the next step. And we don't know right now, but my guess is that our current maps would need some adjustments to comply.
Mr. Rexrod, thank you very much. Any further questions at all from any of the commission members? I don't hear anything else. Mr. Valdez, do you have more to present, or does that conclude your presentation to us today?
Well, I noticed I can't share my screen. I wanted to show you a couple things, and hopefully next time I'll be able to share with you some more information. I wanted to mention that in
Can
the
I
area you're
interrupt for
at.
1 second, Mr. Valdez? I may, in fact,
Sure.
if I can speak with Madam Secretary, I think I indicated, technology-wise, unfortunately, I am a dinosaur. But people in this room that are much smarter than I am may have figured out a way where you can share your
Wonderful.
screen if you'll give me a moment so that I can chat with them, okay? Hang on
Certainly.
1 second. Okay, we have some of our colleagues here in a technology brain trust that are going to take a look and see whether there might be a way to accommodate you such that you can share the screen, because it would be helpful, not just for the commission members, but we have some members of the public who are here as well, and it would be helpful to the extent we're able to do that. So,
Yeah.
if you
I'm
can-
going to go ahead and disconnect and then reconnect to enable the screen sharing. So I'm going to leave this meeting and I'll be back shortly.
Perfect, thank you so much.
All right, I've returned. Hopefully nothing's changed in the last 18 seconds.
Well, let's see if you have the share screen capability now.
Okay, so now I should be able to share my screen, and please let me know if you can see what I'm showing. You
I
should see a
believe we
window up.
can.
Is this visible to everybody?
We're seeing at
No?
least a portion of what purports to be, there we go. Now I think we see the
Okay.
entire page or most of it.
Right, great. So I had it paused, unfortunately. So what I'm showing you today, this is a tool that we use at Redistricting Insights for doing some data analysis. We use it for kind of geographies when we need to know more information beyond just what the census shares. We do have census data loaded here, including the American Community Survey, but this tool also allows us to look at a lot of other data that is available, including, non-demographic data like hospital data and work data, job data, stuff like that, income and the housing and these types of things. So this tool is what we use for those purposes. Today, I just wanted to kind of walk you through a little bit about Barstow and kind of this area kind of going north into the larger expanses of San Bernardino County. And what you'll notice first is you can see these lines. These lines actually indicate census tracts. And so the data I'm going to be talking about today are broken into census tract. Census tract, for those of you who are not familiar, are an amalgam of census blocks, which are also an amalgam of census block groups, which are amalgam of census blocks. So the way it works in hierarchy of geographies is you have census blocks. A group of census blocks together make a census block group, and a group of census block groups together make a census tract. And these tracts are one way of analyzing data. The reason we break it into tract on this particular map and not blocks is because tract is the lowest level that the American Community Survey shares its data. So whenever we're looking at information from American Community Survey, it's shared at tract level, and then we usually have to disaggregate down to the block level in order to get our estimates. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, it is an estimate, is because it's a disaggregation of a tract as well. So these are the census tracts. You'll notice I've centered the map kind of here on Barstow and the Hinckley, Grandview, and the areas around it. And I just want to show you some of the information about Barstow and what it looks like before people might want to talk about their area and communities of interest, but I want to show you a little bit about it. So first, I can show you we have a lot of different types of packages we can look at: economic, housing, jobs, environmental. A couple I like to focus on. I'm just going to show you a few that I think are very interesting, and then if you have other questions, I can see if we have those data as well that I can present to you. So first, I'll just talk about income. When I show income, this is the adjusted gross income for the city of Barstow. You can see in the census tracts, and you can see the information we have. You'll notice up here in the top left, this is the entire county. This is the adjusted gross income of the entire county. And you can see in its census tract in Barstow what that number is. So in Barstow, it is, in the city of Barstow rather, it is 41,126, which is slightly lower than the county of San Bernardino. And then in the Glenwood area, you can see it's just about the same. That's adjusted gross income. We have other types of income, including income measures, including the economic diversity index. Oh, it doesn't actually showing up there, but I think the Gini index of income. Oh, which one of these ones was it? It's actually, there it is. Okay. Well, some of these might not be loading for me right now, but I can talk about some other parts as well. Poverty. So I can talk about the hardship index. This is hardship index. And if you want more information, the hardship index is this composite score reflecting hardships in the community, incorporates things like unemployment, age, dependency, education, per capita income, crowded housing, and poverty into a single score. This is calculated from the American Community Survey. So you can see the hardship index for San Bernardino County is a 69.5. In Barstow, it's actually quite a bit higher. It's an 83.6. So they have quite a bit more hardship in Barstow than they would in the county as a whole. Versus if we look at some of these other cities, the city of Chino Hills has a hardship index of 20.6. You know, as we know, the city of Chino Hills also has a much higher adjusted gross income. It's a much higher affluent community. And so you can see the differences in some of the cities in the county of San Bernardino and how that might play into what these communities of interest are talking about. They have issues in cities like Barstow where, because they're above the high desert and where they're at in terms of relation to major city centers, they have sometimes issues with access to county services. Sometimes they have issues with access to hospital services because they only have a certain number of hospitals in the area, and they're just further away. So they have, you know, food costs and food costs and gas costs sometimes can be higher in areas that are further away from city centers. With housing, look at you can see the city of Barstow. So in San Bernardino County, there are roughly 720,000 housing units. The city of Barstow has roughly 9,400 of them. If you kind of move out a little bit into this other area, you can see not a lot of areas are included. You have Baker, like 218. And then you have all these little Ludlow, Ragtown, Newberry Springs, Essex, which aren't included in Goffs. The reason none of these smaller places are included is because, as I was saying, these data are coming from the American Community Survey. A lot of these places are so small so as not to show up on the American Community Survey's information database. And so they cannot give a good estimate as to how many housing units are located in an area. Now, with the census is not even considered the census, actual decennial census. They are counting heartbeats, but they also will have a housing units number, which will come out, which will update these information, and we should have it for areas in here. However, it will be by block, since a lot of these are not considered even large enough to be census designated places. As I was saying, moving down the 40, you can see Needles, for instance, has 2,800 or almost 2,900 housing units. That's places, and then you can see the plus or minuses just based on the estimates. So there's 2,900 in Needles versus, like I said, Barstow, which is a much larger place, having 9,500 almost. With jobs, we can look at the types of employment and sector. I can say local government workers. This is an interesting one for people to look at in the city of San Bernardino. So if we look over here in the actual city of San Bernardino, this is this large blob right here. We can see roughly 10% of the civilian employed population is a local government worker, which is an interesting number. Versus in Redlands, it's 12%, or almost 13. In Rancho Cucamonga, it's 12%. We come up to the Victor Valley and Apple Valley areas. You can see it's around 12%. And if we come to Barstow, it's actually at 10%. So it's closer to the average for San Bernardino County, which is just about 10%. They also have state government workers and federal government. And the reason I bring these up is because a lot of times people talk about communities of interest, and they talk about a few different things. They talk about, because it can be anything that a community desires it to be. It could be a lot of times religious, it could be a lot of times geographic, and a lot of times it's even where people live, work, and shop. So when you have a lot of government workers in a certain area, typically they are living in an area because that is where their place of work is. And so sometimes they consider themselves also community of interest based on the fact that they all work in that community.
Okay, Fabian, so I just wanted to add here that the reason we're sharing this with you all, Commission, is that oftentimes you'll have somebody come up and testify. We have this resource available to you. It's not part of the online process of the community being able to draw districts, but if you have questions about a community of interest in terms of size or where it might be located in the county, if we can give you data to help back that up to either prove or disprove anything, we're happy to do that and offer this as a resource for you as you're going through this process, because all this is available and we might as well try to use data to support some of the different claims, or at least put a numeric value on some of the quantity of people who fit that demographic.
Right. Another one I wanted to show you, we also have things on pollution, for instance, and the environment. So I can show you the Respiratory Hazard Index. This is the higher than one, it creates a higher risk, value below one's low risk in terms of higher respiratory effects. You can see in the more dense urban areas, you have much higher pollution issues than way out here. And then, as you kind of move out, you don't see, but Needles has a little bit higher. And then the last thing I wanted to show you is we actually have some behavior information, including things like people who bike to work, people who don't exercise. We even have cigarette smoking prevalence and people who don't have teeth. So these are data sources that we have available for the county, for the commission to look at if they have desire, if they want to see more about an area, especially when you're doing commission hearings in a location such as in Barstow today, and you wanted to see more about Barstow, and you wanted to see, well, can we look at a map of where these areas are and what people look like there? I'm more than happy at any time that I'm on these calls with you to bring this up and show you the information.
Mr. Valdez, we certainly appreciate all of the information that you've provided to us today, as well as all of the charts and diagrams. This might be a good time to ask my colleagues on the commission yet again if they have any further questions for you. I'll start. Ms. Hazlett.
Mr. Valdez, when you were talking about the jobs, are you talking about the jobs that are located in those districts or those areas, or are you talking about the jobs held by the citizens that were surveyed through the census? So those are doesn't mean that they're traveling outside of the area for the jobs. Those are how they are employed.
Yes, it is the latter of those two. Yes, it is how the citizens have reported their employment status. So sometimes, for instance, we were looking at Barstow. If there's no federal facility in there, these people might be driving into a federal facility to do the work. That federal facility could be a number of different things. I believe that it does include prisons as a federal facility if they're in a federal prison working there.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Hazlett, thank you. Mr. Creffield, any questions? No. Any questions from my colleagues down at this end? Mr. Little, no. Do we have Mr. Anderson or perhaps Mr. Reynolds, any questions? Now, at this time, I think what I would like to do, though, is indicate we do have a request for public comment, and I believe, if I'm reading it correctly, it's from a gentleman named Mr. William Inger. Mr. Inger, welcome, sir.
Well, thank you, Commission members. Mr. Valdez, this is just a quick question. On my sheet, I don't see the town of Apple Valley anywhere in there. Was there a reason this was excluded? Large population of 75,000.
It might have been another. It might have been another oversight. If I can share my screen again, can you see my screen now?
It shows up on your screen, Mr. Valdez.
Yeah. Apple
Right.
Valley is here. It might have been an oversight. What might have happened is an older version may have been sent where we had the crisscross columns and such. But yes, if you wanted to take note, sir, The city of Apple Valley is here, the 2010 population being 69,135, the 2020 count being 75,791.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, and hopefully that clears it up a bit for you.
But Mr. Valdez, would you be kind enough to show us that screen one more time that has Apple Valley reflected on it as part of the chart with all of the other cities that are listed alphabetically? Because I saw that briefly.
Is it not showing? Is it here now?
That's it. That's the screen.
I'm sorry.
speaking
I'd moved my screen over and was showing the wrong screen. I thought I had it on the right place. My
Hey,
apologies.
If I may,
please.
we can see it now, and if we could get a copy of this, I know you were going to swap those two columns.
Yes, this is the
And,
version I just sent to Pamela.
Great, and then, we had our meeting last week. In fact, you were there, Mr. Valdez, in Apple Valley. It's a very important part of the county and has a very big critical mass of people, so we do want that information.
There is no intention ever to slight the people of Apple Valley.
I know
people of Apple
there
Valley,
isn't.
people.
I just we'll need the information though.
Absolutely. This is the version I sent this version just to Pamela just shortly ago. So she has it, and if she can share this with you as soon as she has the opportunity. But you will have this version. It has also the correct column label.
But it does look like we do show a population increase between 2010 and 2019 on the CVAP. I don't do this to give you a hard time, Mr. Valdez, because this information trickles in and you've got a lot of work to do, and and we really appreciate it. But yeah, if we could get a complete copy, that would be fantastic.
Absolutely. So this, like I said, hopefully this will be shared with you very, very soon. And Apple Valley, like I said before, it is here. You can see it went up approximately 6,000 or so, a little over 6,000 people.
Mr. Valdez, thank you yet again, and I'd like to take a moment and thank Mr. Inger. Sometimes we get lost reading all of the different lines and numbers and charts and so on, and none of us that are familiar with the town of Apple Valley would ever want anyone who lives there or knows about it to think they are forgotten. Far from it. So we appreciate that being brought to our attention, Mr. Inger, and this is why public comment is such an integral part of the process and why we're all so grateful for it. So thank you for being here with us today. Mr. Valdez, you have anything else that you care to present to us this morning or almost this afternoon at this point?
No, I think I've taken up enough of your time today. Just wanted to remind you, I am a resource there for you. If anyone in the commission needs more information, if they have questions, please, feel free to let Pamela know, and hopefully we can be getting you more information whenever you need it.
Well, Mr. Valdez, speaking on behalf of the commission and those members of the public who are here, we want to thank you again. I apologize. One of my colleagues does have a comment. Mr. Jernigan, I apologize. I didn't see your hand.
That's okay. One last question. What is your confidence level in the CVAP estimates?
It's a great question, and one that I was hoping nobody would ask. The reality is I'm confident in the CVAP in so much as I'm confident in using it for what we have to use it for. Do I think it is the most accurate measurement? Maybe not. It's a year old. I would have loved to have seen 2020 CVAP numbers, but due to COVID and due to the census delays and stuff, it's just not a possibility, it looks like. But I'm confident enough looking at these numbers to say that I think we will be okay using them to draw Voting Rights Act districts. If I would not want to say I'd bet my house on it being 100% accurate, if that makes sense. I'm pretty confident though. 95% confident.
If I could follow up on that. So Commissioner Jernigan, to answer your question, it is a survey. So there are some issues in terms of complete confidence, but to give you an idea, when all of the different states came out with their populations, all of those state populations, when we did it for reapportionment right before we all first talked, all of the deviations for all 50 of the different states was less than 1%. When we've been looking around in California, and as the subset gets smaller and smaller, we do see some larger deviations, but they are surveys. And so the Ninth Circuit's been really clear that CVAP is what we need to use for that number. But are there some discrepancies? Yes. And some of the total populations were different from what we saw.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Jernigan, anything further for these gentlemen?
No, that's it.
Any further questions from my colleagues? Mr. Anderson, Mr. Reynolds, any questions at all before we let Mr. Valdez and Mr. Rexrod take their leave? Mr. Valdez, Mr. Rexrod, thank you both. Appreciate your time and your help and your effort, and we know this is an ongoing process. So again, we're very grateful for all your assistance. Thank you much. All right. At this time, I believe we have the pleasure of perhaps hearing from Ms. Williams, if we might do so. And we are always delighted when Ms. Williams is going to make some presentation or present us with some comments. So with that, Ms. Williams, you have the floor.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you again. I apologize once again for some of the formatting and of the data that you received this morning. So I will work with Matt and his team to clean that up for you. I also will be requesting that they add the other column to the city spreadsheet so that we can provide that to you as well. So before I get that out to you, I will vet that again with the consultant group. So just give me a couple hours when I get back to my office to do that. I appreciate it. So we added this item to the agenda today to give the commission and the alternates over here the opportunity to share with me some of the topics that you'd like to discuss as we move forward in this process. So if there's any information that you'd like to have, any topics of interest, particularly with regards to statute, if you'd like some more information on, we do have plans to bring our outside counsel to do a presentation at our next meeting on August 26th in the city of Montclair. But if there's anything that you have, burning inside that you want information on, we are happy to get that to you, and I will do my best to schedule that in the near future. So I'll turn it over to you to share with me your thoughts.
Ms. Williams, thank you so much. Do any of my colleagues have any particular topics or issues? Commissioner Little.
Ms. Williams, this may be what you're already talking about, but we heard today about the CVAP numbers in regard to the Voting Rights Act. And then we have the 5 kind of criteria for compliance with, I guess it's California statute, geographic contiguity and integrity to preserve communities of interest, and then a few more. I'd like to get some meat on the bones on that in terms of, I guess as a lawyer, we'd say the case law behind it. We have the text, but how do we assure that we try to come into compliance with that? And I take it the Voting Rights Act is the trump card. We just have to be in compliance with that, period. And in a sense, it's above the 5, you'll correct me next week if I'm wrong, above the 5 statutory criteria. And I have some thoughts on that, but like I say, to endeavor to, what I was saying earlier is when we look at the numbers and we say, hey, we're in compliance in terms of equality of size, more or less, within about 2%. And I was sort of joking that we could shrug our shoulders and go home and say mission accomplished. But that's really not the case because we have the Voting Rights Act analysis, plus we could come up with better maps, or we could conclude, for example, that here we are in Barstow, that's a community of interest together with Victorville, but our forebears in 2010 concluded that they were I don't know if they concluded whether communities of interest or not, but they put them in different supervisorial districts, and we may come to a different conclusion and recommend to the board that they be in a common district. So anyway, I say all that in a long-winded way to say if we could put some meat on the bones on the criteria through council, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. So that is our plan to discuss the Voting Rights Act at the next meeting, and I will ensure that he has some case law and go over the 5 criteria for compliance.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williams.
My
Thank you
pleasure.
very much.
Commissioner Little, thank you. And Ms. Williams, one thing, as my colleague was speaking, one thing that occurred to me is it might be helpful if perhaps some small handouts might be available for commission members, perhaps illustrating some of the points, specifically dealing with the Voting Rights Act, communities of interest, the topics that Commissioner Little raised, because I'm assuming we'll have a presentation at some time from outside counsel dealing with some of these issues and topics. And if we are a little bit better briefed and a little bit better prepared for when council speak to us, I think it would be very helpful and probably would lead to some discussion
Great.
from my colleagues. So to the extent that's possible, perhaps with the help of our representative from County Council, Ms. Serber, who's been extraordinarily helpful throughout this process, perhaps that would be something that could be made available for all the commissioners, including the alternates, to help get us perhaps a little more engaged and a little more knowledgeable about all of this, which I think at the end of the day is what Commissioner Little is asking for. Not to put words in his mouth, but
That is correct, Judge, that is correct.
We'll work on getting that content together and get that out to you in advance of the meeting on next Thursday.
wonderful. Thank you so much. Any further questions or comments at all for Ms. Williams while we have the luxury of having her here? Mr. Anderson and Mr. Reynolds? Having overlooked you previously, it is my fervent desire never to overlook the two of you again for the remainder of this meeting. So I just wanted to double check and be sure. With that, Ms. Williams, I don't think there are any further comments or questions from my colleagues. But of course, we thank you for your input and your suggestions as always.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Judge, if we could just have a motion and a second and a vote on that direction, I'd appreciate it.
We can certainly do that. I was going to get to that momentarily, but I appreciate the impetus to get this moving along. I think it is appropriate to have a motion by the commission directing staff to provide the sort of materials to us that we have requested. So I will ask if I have a motion from one of my members and our members to provide such direction to all of us.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No opposed. So we will, in fact, direct staff to provide that information to the commissioners. And Ms. Williams, we understand this is an awful lot to ask. If it's not feasible prior to the next meeting, I think all of us would understand. But as soon as it's possible to have that information provided to us, I know all of us would be grateful for it. Okay?
I will get it to the commission as soon as possible. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your help, as always. At this
Maybe,
time,
I'm sorry.
yes, I'm sorry, Madam Secretary.
I just wanted to put on the record that we did not have any requests to speak for that particular item.
And I appreciate that because I didn't see anybody standing up and I saw no hands and you hadn't left your seat. I am going to ask, however, if there is any general comment. We do have some, and I see some coming my way. All right. I think I can pronounce this name correctly. I believe we have a Mr. Buttici. And sir, I apologize in advance if I mispronounced your name, and I promise not to do it again.
Oh, you did great on it. Actually, I put in the request for public comment at the beginning just to save the space on it, but having seen the meeting at this point, I don't have any comment.
Well, sir, thank you so much, and we're delighted that you've spent the time with us this morning that you have. We appreciate your interest in the process. We are always delighted to have members of the public join us, so thank you again. And Madam Secretary, no further requests for public comments?
No, Judge, that's all. Thank you.
Wonderful. Do we have any further requests or any comments at all from any of my colleagues on the commission this morning? Mr. Anderson, Mr. Reynolds, you know I'm going to ask you specifically. Any comments at all or any questions or suggestions at all? Gentlemen, thank you so much. At this time, I think we have exhausted the agenda that we had for today's meeting. So I will at this time indicate that the Advisory Redistricting Commission is now in adjournment. The next scheduled meeting has been referred to already, will be in fact next Thursday, August 26th, again at 10 a.m., but this time at the Montclair City Council chambers. If possible, we would be delighted to see some of you there. If you can't join us, it's my understanding that in fact we live stream the meetings, so we are always available to you by way of accessing your computer to join us, or at least to observe the meetings. I want to thank all of my colleagues, both the regular members and the alternates, and in particular, I want to again express our gratitude at having Ms. Hazlett join us today. She made some invaluable contributions to the discussion, and I want to thank, of course, Mr. Anderson and Mr. Reynolds for being here as well. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you all so very much.